Francis, maybe we'll start with a question really kind of focusing on your area of expertise, which is around education and technology. We talk about sort of disruption in these sectors, but I guess never before has there been such a disruption quite like COVID-19.
Absolutely. I think when people think of education, they often fall back into compulsory education or university education. In my world, we're educating mature adults, the average age of 47. So these are people who have realised that the knowledge they have is not going to get them into the next role they want to do, or that fundamentally they're trying to adapt into this new technological age. And so the technology we've seen almost leapfrog ahead in the last few weeks. It's really putting us back on track to where we should have been perhaps 2 or 3 years ago with the digitization of systems and processes to bring us in line with other markets in the world that we trade with.
And there must be so many adults in that position at the moment. They've maybe had a career, had a job their entire lives, and now faced with a very uncertain future.
I think it's an interesting market in New Zealand because we can sell to each other, and we do have an amazing ability to have a domestic market and have small businesses. And of course, because our economy is underpinned by small business, sometimes our adaptability to new technologies and digitization has been quite slow because we haven't had to trade and have to have a sort of an ecosystem that works and integrates with digital systems globally. But right now, I think people realize that we have to be able to move more product and services, and actually the domestic market won't enable us to grow the economy back in the way we need it to. And so the gaps are really sewing together systems that are operating globally, and that means being in the cloud, that means having system automation, it means having the ability to have really great e-commerce sites that actually integrate with logistics and manufacturers. Like there's so many pieces. So it's not about sort of piecemeal or siloed parts of digitization. It really is the threading together of all these systems. And that's what people need to learn.
There's been so much talk about this sort of reset across so many facets of our society. Where do you think the real opportunities lie, and how important is that we act quickly?
Fundamentally, we've seen the biggest change, which is people working remotely. And while that may feel like a temporary move, and organisations are probably very keen to get everybody back in, I think what that really symbolises is the efficiency and actually some of the productivity gains that come letting people work in a different way. But to do that, you also need to understand what tools you need to make that system work, which again comes back to things like working in the cloud, having communication channels which are always on, the likes of a Slack channel, utilising video conferencing as we all have come very competent at, but also documents that can be shared. And so if you think about those digitisation to enable that, we've already gone through that transition. So coming out of this, almost everyone who could work from home has changed their behaviour. But now that's the new norm. And I think coming out of this now, we have to understand how do our businesses catch up with the human aspects of wanting change. And I'm really excited about this idea that the economy is going to increasingly thinking about society and humanity and actually equal and fairness for more people to get into roles that actually gives them a really great opportunity to contribute and feel valued in their roles, and less around minimum hourly wages and actually clocking in and clocking out. Look, if you think of the capital markets and what drives them, right now we're looking at the new economic parameters emerging. And first of all, after any form of adversity, particularly financial adversity, people buckle down and start thinking about their resilience. And financial resilience is at the top of that list is how much did I have in terms of reserves? How much had I overstretched myself? And what we do know is that a lot of people live with very little reserve. And it could be a week, could be 2 weeks of reserve, and in many cases, not at all. There's going to be a certain number of people saying, how do we think of capital? How do we invest in things which will give us better returns and security long term? But also thinking about management in terms of, do we have a system with management where we go through the motions? We turn up at the day, we attend a few meetings, we push some pieces of paper around, we decide on a few processes, and then we come out and we do it all over again. I think we're going to actually go back and say, why do we do it that way, and what's the end game? And I know just even conversations within my own community and my peers around the world, the number of people are saying, I'm not sure that the idea that I spend such a big part of my life working for an organisation to give them benefit when I'm doing something I don't necessarily absolutely love. So I think managers are going to have to think about why people work for them and what they're getting from that. But our capital markets, how people invest, is going to be questions. We're going to find it harder probably to find financial investment from various parts of the community. The banks look different right now. So actually we are going to have to say, what will our economy be built on? Actually, is it's going to be the same economic kind of priorities that we've had previously? How do we future-proof our sector in New Zealand so that when we open the borders again and we become a trading nation again, that actually they're the things that people are going to be able to grow into and sustain us in the long term, but also managers and saying, what value do you bring to the role and what do you take from the role? And actually saying, is this really what you want the next 5 or 10 years to be based upon? So there's lots of questions being asked.
How important do you think it's going to be to have really strong and visionary leadership through this period?
I don't think there's ever been a time in my life that's been more important. We're seeing close up different leadership styles globally, particularly in the political fields, and how people are responding and resonating with either a pessimistic or an optimistic view. I think right now we need to think about risk in a very different way. So leaders often their role is to really curb risk, but also maximize potential. There is almost a contradiction at all times of like, how do you grow things forward without taking risk, particularly if you've got shareholders and you're expecting people with returns and dividends out. But I think right now people will need to invest significantly more in research and development and being much more innovative if they're going to come through. So that changes the role of a leader to saying, okay, now we're going to bring about the best capability we possibly can. And one of the things I often say is, the brightest person in the room is the room. It's the collective power of many to be able to innovate. And I think right now there's a lot of hierarchical leadership where people at the top of the decision-making pyramid are making decisions for many. I think that needs to change, and there needs to be much more of a collective leadership style where people are getting on board their teams and understanding the viewpoints of people with different backgrounds. So that diversity card needs to be played more than ever. And I'm not talking about gender diversity, but I'm talking about background. The scientists need to work with the creatives, and the writers need to work with the people who understand engineering. We really need to understand problem solving, and leaders need to be able to identify actually how today's contemporary problems can be solved in a very different way.
If you could set a new course for New Zealand's future, what would be your priorities?
I think we need to diversify the industries and make sure that we're thinking through the lens of long-term industries which are highly sustainable, but also put us on the world map in terms of quality, and actually making sure we're highly informed and knowledgeable, and that we actually develop capability to take away this limitations of people working on these hourly rates, which the inequality in New Zealand is something we cannot be proud of and we need to change.
If you could ask for just one thing to be changed, what would that be?
That people would invest in themselves a lot more in terms of the knowledge sabbatical, actually taking time out in a given week in a given year as adults to make sure they continuously evolve and learn, but also unlearn. So actually forgetting some of the things that perhaps were true in a different time, and making sure that we have the best possible knowledge and information at our fingertips.